Hey everyone. So I had a conversation with a client fairly recently that was the inspiration for this week's training. And I wanted to talk to you this week about the overarching concept of being able to update your pricing with existing clients and being able to reaffirm expectations and boundaries with your existing clients. What happens so often um, is that when you're working with a client, they will ask for extra things. And because, in instances, especially with anchor clients, you don't want to increase the fees to them out of fear that you're not going to retain the business and that it's going to have negative impact for you. And what it actually causes really is you're less profitable, right? So what ends up happening for the vast majority of agencies is that as you grow in scale, you may increase revenue, but your profitability just stays the same. It doesn't actually change at all. So you end up in a place where your revenue is going like that, but your profitability is just flatlined. And for what? You have more risk, you have more team members, you have more stress, more anxiety, more clients, more all of it. And if you don't actually have the benefit of it, why? What's the point? Why would we want to do that? And the mistake here is that we are not recognizing the value that we are providing to clients and not owning it. And what I want for you guys after this training is to really adjust your mindset here to starting to think about what ultimately and how you should be actually working with clients. So I wanted to tell you a little bit of a story here. This is an agency that New York that was in a place where they were a substantial size agency and were experiencing exactly what we were talking about. From the stage that they were at 2 million, having grown to over 8. And this is true for smaller agencies in the 200,000 to 500,000 range as well. And I've seen this happen loads of times in every single size of agency. But this one is, as I mentioned, the numbers. The experience that they had was that they had this anchor client that was 60-70% of revenue. And we were going through an evaluation of the profitability of the agency because they were sub even the industry standard and doing less than 5% net. And it wasn't worth it for them because they were just as profitable at 8 million as they were at 2. And for what? And the reason why this was happening was that this anchor client, realistically speaking, the scope that they were currently delivering on, and if you looked at the SOW of what they had initially signed up for, there was literally zero resemblance. I had no idea how they even got from where they were to where they, from what the SOW was to where they are now. It made zero sense. Like it was completely apples and oranges. They weren't even in the same ballpark. And their fear was they had to do these things because it was such a huge amount of their revenue. And after they going through the analysis and looking through their projects and the hours associated with it and looking through every single client and project within it and all of that, I mean, there's other insights that were derived from it, but this particular client, for every single hour worked, they lost money. Every single one. And it was the vast majority of their revenue. And I want you to put yourself in this agency owner's shoes for a moment. When we had a conversation and my feedback to them was, you either need to increase and change the fee for this client or you need to fire them, but there's no point in continuing to do the work here. And the agency owner looked at me like, you are effing nuts. Completely out of your mind. But realistically speaking, numbers to me don't lie. It's the core of what I have for assurance. I mean, as an accountant, as a total type A person in the first place, that's how I see the world. And once we actually had let go of this anchor client, we ended up letting them go. We were able to refill the business, have the resources internally to dramatically grow the business without adding any additional team members, and going from a place where they were marginally profitable to many times over 3 times industry standard at just over 25% net profitability, and having replaced that revenue. They were in a much better place, dramatically better place, less revenue, same team members, higher profit. And I mean, it feels like a dream, right? But I want you to look at where you currently are right now. And I want you to think about this ultimately and how to even have a conversation. And this is an older story, the one that I just shared with you. But the client that inspired me to talk to you about this week was in the same situation. And the question is, how exactly do I go about having this conversation? It's not just, hey, we're changing your fee, right? What exactly do we do? And how do we approach the conversation? And so I want to give you guys a little bit of a framework that allows for you to think about how exactly you can go about having this conversation with a client if you're in this place. So in the workbook, and it's very simple, I want you to start with what you have done, both the positive and the negative. So what exactly, where are you? What have you accomplished? What has went well? What hasn't? All of that. The good, bad, the ugly. The client already knows and is aware of all of this. And if you avoid talking about, and loads of agencies avoid talking about any of the improvements that should be made, and ultimately I think it's wrong because one, the client is already aware of it and they feel it. And so they just feel like you're ignoring them and only talking about the good things that they feel sold to. And two, you're actually leaving opportunity on the table because you're not talking about what adjustments you should be making to make things better for them. The next thing that you want to talk about in the conversation is what exactly are their goals. And you should, if you've been working with this client for a while, you should already know what these goals are. And so the way that the conversation would be held is, hey, these are what I understand your goals to be. Just want to confirm that they are still correct, right? Yeah, those are them. And so then you're going to then talk about, here are the strategies that we are currently employing. And then here are the additional strategies that we think that you should consider that will allow for you to get to XYZ goal. Some of them that your agency does and some of them that your agency doesn't do, so that they don't feel like you're being sold to. And then ultimately, you then have the conversation around pricing. And this is somewhat inspired by the How to Win Friends and Influence People old book that's been read and rewritten loads of times by Dale Carnegie, about the concept of actually just admitting what involvement you had. And so it's taken from loads of experience in doing this exact same thing with other agencies, and actually essentially saying to the client, hey, this is our fault, really. We need to actually take a look at what the SOW is. It doesn't actually match what we are currently doing, and we need to make adjustments. Happy to have an open conversation, but let's schedule time to talk about it. I wanted to take a look at it. So you're going to let them know that you're going to be doing this, and then with a short period of time, you actually want to schedule a follow-up, ideally the following day or within a couple of days, so that you don't have them sitting in a place of nervousness. And ultimately, then you right-size the account. Here's what the cost is going to be. And ultimately knowing that sometimes letting them go is the best thing for you to do. If they have to go away, then they have to go away. It allows for you to break with what's currently not working. And in my experience, when you break with something, you end up having a breakthrough to something else. And I have personally experienced this loads of times, where making that scary decision, letting go of clients and substantial amounts of revenue that really weren't working for you, that were draining you, that weren't working for you, that was out of scope and you weren't making the profit, but it was a substantial amount of revenue and ultimately covering some expenses. As you start to choose yourself and choose your agency and choose your future over this particular person, it changes the way that you see the world. So I hope that this has inspired you to take a look at your existing client roster and see ultimately sort of what's going on for you and what adjustments that you should be making. If you have any questions of like, hey, this is a specific sort of nuance about it, feel free to reach out to me. I'm ultimately here as a resource, and I really want you to have the result. I really want you to have an agency that is profitable for you and is creating impact both for your client and for yourself. Having that profitability and having the space to be able to not be in this really anxious place that the vast majority of agency owners are in. I hope that if you're in this place, that you do reach out, because I really do want to help. Look forward to hearing and getting your DM. All right, everybody. Have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.